Okay, can you see my screen? I got to give you, by the way, I got to set your types of orders.
Okay.
Can you see it?
I do see it now. Yeah.
All right. So which of the following may be purchased in the secondary market?
Okay, so I can make the screen bigger. That's good.
Yeah, I can make my screen bigger too. Let me do that for you.
Okay.
Boom, boom, boom. Oh, it might be a little too big.
Yeah, for me, I can make it a little bit wider from my end too.
Sure.
Okay, so let's see which of the following may be purchased in the secondary market. Eliminating B and C.
This is very, very testable. You should definitely know that closed-end funds trade supply and demand in the secondary market.
Because it's
Two things that you need to know trade in the secondary market: closed-end funds and ETFs. Open-end funds do not trade in the secondary market. So you were right to eliminate B, but you should know closed-end. Now I have a video that contrasts open-end and closed-end funds, and I have a slide that's very target rich. And make sure you can contrast open versus closed-end funds. What is a typical funding source for a defined benefit plan?
employer contributions. D.
Yep, D, right on.
Yep.
I don't know many employers anymore who pass out these ones. Ooh, this is sweet. We say, hey, after X number of years, you're going to get a percentage of base pay, healthcare for the rest of your life. Very easy for a corporation to have an unfunded pension liability with a defined benefit plan because the employer is assuming the investment risk.
Yeah.
Defined contribution plan, where the employer defines the contribution to you they're going to make on your behalf, are really difficult to have an unfunded pension liability. Which of the following transactions, if any, may be done in a margin account?
Sell 100 ABC to close. B.
Which of the following transactions, if any, must be done in a margin account?
So
When you want to borrow money or borrow securities, you have to have a margin account. And where it says sell to open, that is a short position, and all short positions must be conducted in a margin account. So it's actually D.
Sell. Okay.
Right, D. Now, when you're testing what, the end of this month?
Beginning of next month.
Okay, so we're just using the riff. So I'm not going to mark you wrong. I'm going to talk about them and help you with the right answer. And we're going to use this to riff. And then what I'm going to do is send you a copy of the PDF of this, and you can actually use it to make poor man's flashcards or read the questions with the rationales. I'm giving it to you orally, but you'll have it in printed form. And then we also will send you a copy of the video.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Regulation for a firm that offers advice on securities for a fee is based on which of the following?
So offer advice for a fee. So it's the advisors, right?
Right on. The Investment Advisor Act of 1940.
Yeah.
ABC. If you give investment advice, you tell people you're in the business of giving investment advice. You want compensation, you're going to have to, register your firm with either the SEC or state. Now, that means that some people are going to go on and take not only a SIE, but a 7 and then a 66 or a 663, 65. Because if you want to represent an investment advisory firm, you need a 65 or a 66.
That's what I'm.
Tombstone may contain all the following except.
Name of the underwriters, B.
It's actually going to be an offer to sell the security. So we're going to make a registration statement with the SEC. That's called 33, very testable. You're going to sell brand new securities to the public. You're going to make a registration statement. We enter into the cooling off period or quiet time, which is a minimum of 20 days. If we didn't have that 20-day cooling off period, I'd be calling you and saying, hey, you know what IPO stands for, don't you? Instant profit opportunity. I say, listen, what I can do during the cooling out period or quiet time is send you a preliminary prospectus, very testable, also known as red herring. It has pretty much everything you need information-wise to make the investment, except, test question, the final offering price, which is pretty damn important. So based on that preliminary prospectus, that red herring, very testable, I can accept indications of interest which are non-binding on all parties. And I'm not allowed to advertise, but I am allowed to place a tombstone. Now, if you're in a graveyard and you see a tombstone, there's not a lot of information. Their birthday, when they died, it says loving father or husband. For more complete information, see the obituary. In our business, a tombstone says, here's the key point for this question, this is neither an offer to sell or a solicitation to buy the following security. An offering is made only by a copy of the prospectus. Read it carefully. Do not send money. So this appears as a matter of record.
Okay.
Paula has applied for a representative position with Great Sky Securities, a broker-dealer firm, and a FINRA member. While in college, she was a bit of a troublemaker. Since completing her education 4 years ago, she's been a model citizen. Which of the following issues from her past may result in statutory disqualification? Ooh.
Anything that is older, a charge 6 years ago.
Well, it's not a charge. So the 3 reasons for statutory disqualification. These are 3 yes answers on your U4. All the yes answers are bad. And if you can fill out a U4 and answer all the answers no, we call that a clean U4. But if you have a yes answer, we in the business, not test, will call that a dirty U4. And there are some answers that are dirtier than others. Number 1, conviction of a felony within the last 10 years. I used it in class, say, do you may check this box? Yes. This guy raised his hand and said it was no big deal. I go, well, you're a little confused, my friend. Felony means it was a big deal. A misdemeanor involving embezzlement of monies and securities. Ding, 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 D. So not any misdemeanor, one that involves monies and securities. I joke, I say, what were you doing before you wanted to work at my broker-dealer? And you say, Dean, I was a teller at the bank. And I said, what happened there? You said, I was convicted of misdemeanor embezzlement. I said, what do you want to do for us? You said, I want to work in the cashiering department. I think so, right? Number 3.
They are all bad, but this is the worst in all.
That's exactly right. And then the last one, number 3, have you ever been denied, suspended, or revoked registration in the past? I call this the don't we know you from somewhere rule. You know, you look awful familiar, you know, like Jordan Belfort, Wolf of Wall Street, he would have to check this box. Yes, that he was denied, suspended, revoked, he was barred from the securities industry.
Yeah.
Your customer places an order to buy 300 shares at 100, fill or kill. When the order is entered, there are 250 shares available at $100 per share. What happens to the order?
Obviously, it's not what he asked.
That's right.
Fill or kill. So let's see what options we have. So they will do nothing, but the order stays open until the end of the day if more inventory becomes available. And then they won't buy anything, the order will be canceled and nothing will be done. I think the D.
Right on. Good job.
Okay.
Good job. Yeah. A is all or none, and B is immediate or canceled.
Mm-hmm.
Which of the following is the least accurate statement about the U.S. balance of payments? So, the balance of trade, we have debits and credits, the balance of trade. Debit is U.S. dollars going out, and credits are foreign currency coming in.
Is the least accurate statement if the US balance of payment is currently running at a surplus. So I'm thinking we eliminate the A and B.
You're right, because A and B are true surplus. If we
Mhm.
have a credit, that means we got more foreign currency, yen, pesos, euros coming in than dollars going out. So you're correct that A is accurate. And you
Okay.
are correct that B is accurate,
Mhm.
right? If the US dollar is weak, it makes our exports more competitive and imports less competitive. So now you got a 50-50, you're
Mhm.
C or D. And remember, it says least accurate.
Least accurate. So is it least accurate? So is
That's
not accurate.
That's right. So now you got to decide one of these is accurate, one of these is not. You're down to C and D.
Um, I think exports are currently exceeding imports.
That's the definition of a surplus.
Mm-hmm. I think it's C.
D and dog. Yep.
Uh,
Few dollars are flowing into the United States than are flowing out. Right. So C is true. If we have a surplus, it's because we're selling more stuff overseas.
mhm.
Boeing is selling a bunch of airplanes. I thought it was kind of funny. um, I have a weird sense of humor, I first admit, but kind of funny to see President Trump acting as a salesman for Boeing.
Yeah.
And he was telling our, foreign trade partners, one thing you could do to help the deficit of trade we have with you is put in an order for Boeing for 10 billion. Woohoo! That would be a $10 billion credit to the balance of trade, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which federal department leads the United States efforts to prevent money laundering?
The Treasury
Right
Department.
on, right on. And remember, in our WSPs, our written supervisory procedures, we have to have a section on money laundering, anti-money laundering, that all reps have to read.
Yeah.
We have to have an AML officer. We have to conduct an AML test annually. There are two documents that we should be familiar with under the Bank Secrecy Act. Don't you love how things are called the opposite of what they are? The Bank
CTR.
Secrecy Act. Yeah, I think you were telling me you have some banking background, so you're probably familiar with this.
Yeah.
What it allows the bank to do is file test question as CTR,
Mm-hmm.
currency transaction report for more than 10,000 or more, or a suspicious activity report, 5,000 or more, for things that are commercially illogical, origin of funds, things like that. Now,
Yes.
you should know the stages of money laundering so we can intervene. The easiest place to intervene is in placement, right? So first stage is placement, then layering, and then integration. So you've got a couple of
Yeah.
questions on money laundering.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, did you see that? TD, the bank, TD, paid like over $1 billion in something for lack of anti-money laundering controls. Crazy.
Yeah. It's so much fraud going around.
Oh, crazy. All the following regarding a trust set up for the purpose of holding commercial property or mortgages on commercial property are true, except.
So gains can pass through the owners of these shares. This investment could not be considered open or closed-end funds. Ownership of these shares may be provided for the receipt of dividends. Investor may never purchase share in this trust or exchange or over the counter. So all of the following are set up for a purpose of holding commercial property or mortgages. But I don't think they are passed through the owners of the shares.
Yeah, all the following are true. So yeah, they accept.
Except, I think B, but I'm not so.
Well, these are called real estate investment trusts, right? And so A is true. They're going to have to pass through at least 90% of their net investment income.
Mhm.
These investments could be considered open-end, where they're issuing new shares, or closed-end. Ownership of these shares may provide for the receipt of dividends. Investors may never purchase shares in a REIT in the secondary market. That is not true. Some REITs do trade.
Mhm.
Stop. One I owned for years, I don't own anymore. It's called Boston Properties, BXP, trades on the New York Stock Exchange.
Mhm.
It's if it's traded, that's a liquid way to buy real estate. You would buy a REIT for the same reason you buy a mutual fund: professional management, diversification, ease of ownership. But instead of buying a professionally managed portfolio of securities, you're buying a professionally managed portfolio of real estate, commercial properties, mortgages, whatever the case may be.
Okay.
What defined is an established way of mitigating non-systematic risk. This is very much a test question.
Asset allocation, concentration, diversification, margin purchases, diversification.
Right on. Right. This is also known as selection risk.
Mm-hmm.
There are 10 equally suitable ideas. You picked one of the 10, the other 9 did fine. The one you picked under, you should, have bought a mutual fund is the easiest way for people to diversify. But the risk you're still going to be exposed with is systematic risk. So despite diversification, you're still going to be subject to systematic risk. Risk in the system, tendency of securities prices to move together.
Okay.
All the following are SROs except.
I think A, New York Stock.
Oh, no, the New York Stock Exchange is a self-regulatory organization.
And
Listen,
then
I tell you, I say, hey, listen,
B.
if I tell you the FINRA's on line 1, the SEC's on line 2, you better pick up line 2, right? The SEC. They say, do you know who we are? I say, yes, you have primary jurisdiction, interpretation, and enforcement of the domestic securities laws of the United States of America.
Uh-huh.
SROs are just clubs. They can kick you out. The SEC is the government. I'm with the government and I'm here to help.
All the other ones are.
These SEC, boy, I'll tell you what, their attorneys there don't make as much as they make in private practice. But what they don't get in money, they get in power. The SEC has a lot of power, right? Created by 34. Now, the other one I would be aware of is the MSRB, the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. Test question: publishes rules. They publish A rules, administrative rules, D rules, definitional rules, G rules, general rules, and test question: they have no enforcement power. So since they have no enforcement power, who enforces MSRB rules? Well, FINRA, right? So FINRA is the one who's going to be important. If you're a bank and you're just doing munis, it would be the FRB, Comptroller of Currency, and FDIC. But this one, I like this one. The SEC is not a self-regulatory organization. That's the government. It's an agency of the government.
Okay.
An issuer has issued bonds with a call feature. It is likely these bonds, kind of a judgment question.
So they issued bonds with a call feature. it is like bonds have.
Judgment question. This one's a judgment question. Don't get many judgment questions on the SIE, but you do get some. You know, the three styles of questions are recognition, practical application, and judgment.
I'm thinking it's the C that the coupon will be called away by the issuer before the maturity.
You say, hey, Dean, the bonds you're offering me seem to have a higher coupon than other bonds I've been looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, I'm not surprised. And the reason you're getting a higher interest rate is because you may not be able to hold these bonds to maturity.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be they have a higher coupon because this is an advantage to the issuer to be able to replace high cost debt with low cost debt. So this is an advantage of the issuer. By the way, test taking trick. Whenever we have an A and a D choice that say opposites, it's got to be either A or D in this example because they can't both be true in the same universe. Right. So you can't leave those both in the answer set.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever we have a pair of opposites, we can get a 50-50. You said a coupon that will be called away by the issuer before maturity. Now, coupons are the interest you receive. If you didn't say coupon, you would have been correct.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the coupon never changes, right? That's that interest percent, 6%. So,
yeah.
Which of the following best describes buyback and tender offer?
So the buyback and tender offer. So tender offer. I'm thinking it's a D. A buyback is company that buys a company that is previously.
Oh, I like this. This question is about corporate actions.
Mm-hmm.
And one corporate action would be what we call a spinoff.
Mm-hmm.
That spinoff isn't where you buy back. This would be where we have a subsidiary. An example would be Alphabet. And Alphabet decides to spin off Waymo. They say for every 100 shares of Alphabet, here's 10 shares of Waymo. It used to be our subsidiary of our parent company, and now we're going to make it an independent company. It's going to go its own way. The one that's in the news right now is splitting up Warner Brothers Discovery. They're splitting it into two, and they're going to have a spinoff of the cable assets, and then the other remaining company will be the movie studio. That's called a spinoff. It could be testable. It's not the answer to this. This is called treasury stock. Treasury stock are shares that the corporation has purchased, and treasury stock has no voting rights and pays no dividends. So if we're a board and we have excess capital, we say, how do we return excess capital to our shareholders? One way is through a dividend, and another is to purchase stock. Now, buyback means we simply go into the secondary market and we buy our stock. You know, recently Wells Fargo has been released of its cap on $2 trillion in assets. And I saw the CEO being interviewed, and he said, it's so nice now that we can do other things besides buy back our stock. We had excess capital, but we weren't allowed to increase the size of our bank by doing any kind of acquisitions or going past that cap. And so he said, now we're probably, he said, and then people said, well, you're not going to buy back stock? And he goes, well, we'll probably buy some back, but you know, tender offers, we go directly to the shareholders and ask for the stock back. Now, Berkshire Hathaway was buying back stock, and they asked Mr. Buffett why he did it through a tender to his existing owners rather than just going to the secondary market and buying it. And he said, well, I like the tender a little better than the buyback in the secondary market because it tells me who are my long-term shareholders.
Oh.
I said, listen, you don't want to be with us any longer? Now, all tender offers have to remain open for 20 days. So whether this is X Holdings offer to buy your Twitter stock for $54.20 in cash, Whether this is Berkshire Hathaway tendering for its own shares, doesn't matter. Tender offers have to be remain open for 20 days. A customer purchases 500 shares of common stock at 72. After holding the position for 9 months, they sell at 75. The result of these transactions.
So it's short
You're
gain
correct. It's short term. So you got a 50-50.
term.
Yeah, because you've got two that say short term. It's short term because you weren't at risk for more than 12 months. Right. So you are correct that 9 months is short term. That means it's going to be taxed at your ordinary income tax rates. Now you got to decide, is it a $300 gain or is it a $1,500 gain?
15 because he has 500
So
shares.
there you go. Excellent.
Mhm.
Excellent. When an investor opens a position by going long the security, they can close the position by
Open. So the investor open a position by going long. So open purchase, close sale, right?
excellent, excellent. So now I just got to figure out what is closest to what you just said. You're absolutely correct. So is it selling the security A or selling the security short C?
We're going long the security. So going long, I think it's A.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
On the test, you would have been more right because on the test, it would have been just the way you said it. They would have said, which of the following is used to eliminate or reduce a long position? You'd say closing sale. If
Yeah.
they say, which of the following is used to eliminate a short position? You'd say closing purchase. Excellent.
Huh.
Each of the following provides an exemption from registration under 33 except. Kind of a weird way to ask this, but it is testable.
So except it's about the paper, right?
Yeah, 33 is the Prospectus or Paper Act. And what it says is you're going to sell brand new securities to the public. You have to
So
make a registration statement. There are, however, exempt transactions where we do not have to make a registration statement.
So I think it's with the institutions, with the Reg D, but I'm not sure.
Well, Reg D is a safe harbor, an exempt transaction where we don't have to make a registration statement. So Reg D, a private placement where we are only going to offering securities to accredited investors. Very testable. What makes you accredited? 1, 2, 3 $1 million net worth, inclusive of your primary residence, or $200,000 in annual income for the last 2 years, with the expectation of 200 this year, or 300,000 merit and filing jointly. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Right. There's others, but that's the big one on the test. Now, in that Reg D, that's an exempt safe transaction or safe harbor. Reg A. Reg A is an exempt transaction, a safe harbor. We're selling unregistered securities under 33. With Reg A, we can raise up to 75 million. There's 2 tiers, tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1, I can go up to 20 million. Rule 147 is again a safe harbor exempt transaction. This is an intrastate offering of securities. I'm only offering it in one state. I'm only selling it to residents of that state. And they have to have, the issuer has to have 80% of the business and assets within the state. So Reg A, Rule 147 and Reg D are all exempt transactions or safe harbors, which leads us to the answer. There's no such thing as that. Right? No such thing as that. 6 days into the cooling off period. So we said very testable. The cooling off period is a minimum of 20 days.
Yeah.
And so we are 6 days in. We receive a deficiency letter from the SEC. So they say, you know what, we think investors should have some more information. And we say, aye, aye, right? The SEC says they'd like us to do something. We say, yeah, well, no problem. We're more than happy to do it. Once the issuer submits these, assuming they satisfy the deficiency, the cooling off period will resume. With no other deficiencies, the issue should become effective. So they're testing you on the 20 days, right?
Mhm.
So 6, and that means 14, right? By the way, on the test, it'll just be 20 days. They won't mess you up with this kind of a scenario, right? So it's 14. The only test question is to know it's 20. Which of the following regarding established customers of a broker dealer in the purchase of penny stocks is true? Very, very testable. You need to know what is a penny stock. It's a non-NASDAQ OTC stock under 5. So the definition alone is testable. And there are additional rules for penny stocks.
So they are exempt from the suitability statement requirement. I think that's true.
Yeah.
They are not exempt. That's not true. They are exempt from disclosure rules. I think that's true too. And they are not exempt. So 1 and 3.
1 and 4.
4.
You said that. You said it correctly.
Yeah. No,
you said it correctly. Now the other test question is, what makes you an established customer? So what makes you an established customer?
if you have any transactions within
how many transactions?
at least one transaction within.
No, 3 transactions. So to become an established customer, you have to do 3 transactions or have funds with the broker dealer for a year. All right, so very testable. One more test question. If you do have penny stocks in your account, what is the minimum standard to send you a statement?
Quarterly.
No, quarterly is if you don't have a penny stock. If you have a penny stock, it's monthly. It's monthly.
Yeah.
The potential that inflation will devalue the fixed dividend income payments received by preferred stockholders is known as
Purchasing power risk.
right on. That's exactly what that is, right? What is the investments we have for people who are concerned about purchasing power risk? What are a couple securities that I might recommend to you if you're worried about inflation or purchasing power risk?
Common stock.
Right on. Common stocks. Historically, you're correct. Common stocks historically have beat inflation. Would be one more that would keep pace with inflation.
It will be preferred, maybe.
Tips. Treasury inflation protected securities. Your client, Henry Swinson, is very frugal. He likes mutual funds. Oh, he feels like mutual funds have too many expenses. Well, there is a problem with having monkeys harvest bananas. I mean, they do eat the product. I mean, and he doesn't believe over a long period, active management of investment advisors outperform benchmarks. Ooh. So it sounds like he's a, believer in what we call the efficient market hypothesis. But he does like the idea of a pooled investment in the stock market rather than picking individual stocks on his own. Which of the following would you recommend?
So closed-end fund, an exchange-traded fund, an exchange-traded note, an open-end fund. So he doesn't like the fees.
Yeah, so A goes out because he doesn't like active management, and closed-end funds certainly have active management.
Yes. And an open end will have 2, right?
Yeah, that's right. So but now D is out.
I think an exchange-traded fund.
There you go. You're correct. The exchange rate note wouldn't be an equity investment. It would be a debt instrument, right? And you'd be worried about whether they can pay you what they promised in terms of matching the index, right? Yeah. So he says a pooled investment in the stock market. I'm being kind of picky here, but an ETN is not a pooled investment in the stock market. An ETF is. Good job. The holders of which of the following securities are considered owners of the issuing corporation. So we capitalize corporations with equity and debt.
Preferred stock and common stock.
They're excellent. That's exactly right. And 1 and 2 would be the debt.
Yeah.
By purchasing shares of stock in a company, investors can benefit from which of the following?
An increase in the price of the shares, an increase in the price of the company's debt securities, an increase in the yield of the company outstanding debt securities, the receipt of profits to be distributed. So purchasing share in stock in a company. So shares are not the debt.
Yeah, I like that, by the way. That logic works.
I'm thinking it's 1 and 4, an increase in the.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. That's excellent. By the way, you don't you love the test? What is number 4 in plain English? That's a dividend, right? So the amount of the profits that we distribute is called a dividend. So, the language is, challenging. When you told me your background, English is a second language, and I always tell this story about a young lady, and her primary language was Mandarin. She thought I was laughing at her, and I was laughing with her because she would tell me that she would put words into her Google Translator, no Mandarin word equivalent would come back. And I said, well, she goes, why do you think that's funny? And I said, because I don't think the test is in English to begin with. You got to get kind of first read the question and put it into English, plain English to, kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
What is the spread on a stock quote?
The difference between the bid price and the ask price.
Beautiful. Excellent. 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 And remember, in the over-the-counter markets, those are negotiated quote-driven markets. And so that bid would be the price at which the market maker is willing to buy the security. And the ask or offer would be the price at which they're willing to sell that security. Right? So very good. Very good. Which of the following prospectus must be provided no later than the confirmation of the sale?
They're so tricky all the time, all the paperwork. So
Yeah, I'm with you. It's
some
another one of those ones we were just joking about, the difference between English and this.
so the stationary prospectus is the first one.
That's right. The statutory prospectus is the full-blown,
Yes.
everything you need, right?
Yeah.
So, good job. WRG stock is quoted at 21 bid, 21.15 for a customer order. Which of the following is true?
It's quoted as 21 bid, 21 offer. So a purchase can be made at 21 per share if buying the market. So no, a purchase can be made at 21.15.
Excellent.
Per share. So we have the 2, and then a sale. So and then it's the spread of 0.15.
Beautiful. Love it. That's absolutely correct. The way I think about it, the customer always pays the high price, always receives the low price. What's that called? The securities industry, right?
From your video.
Yeah, I have that. Know your bid from your ask. Indeed. Yeah. The Big Shoe Sneaker Company is a small manufacturer of athletic shoes. It's selling $100 million worth of its stock, and this will be its first public offering. It's going to use the money to enhance both marketing and production with a plan to grow the business and obtain a NASDAQ listing in 2 or 3 years. Okay. So it's not on NASDAQ yet. After initial sale of new shares, buyers of the stock in the over-the-counter market should expect to receive a final prospectus.
So receive the final prospectus for how many days? Buyers in the secondary market are never entitled to the IPO prospectus. That's kind of, I mean, it's true.
Yeah, this is the most thinly traded kind of security you can buy. There's not going to be a lot of research available on this. And so it's going to be 90 days from the effective date.
Yeah.
So I doubt you'll see this on an SIE. I think it's more of a 24 type of a question, but it is 90 days. And the A is not true. Buyers in the secondary market can be entitled to prospectuses depending on what kind of security it is. For a follow-on offering, it'd be 40 days. For a NASDAQ or New York IPO, it would be 25. I don't think you're going to see that on your test. All the following is true about local government investment pools, except.
Investors must be provided a prospectus. But they don't need to register, right?
Well, that's true. Pools are not required to register. And remember, so they're asking except. All the following is true, except D is true.
So
Now,
this,
I had somebody who was struggling with these except questions. And one thing I had recommended to him is to take his maybe his scratch paper and just write A, B, C, D on his scratch paper, then read each statement and put true, T for true, or F for false. That's true. And what they're asking me for, by the way, would is true except. Don't you love that? It's kind of did a U-turn.
yeah, those are throwing me off.
I'm with you. So this is true. Now, by the way, that means the other reason I think that's helpful as a recommendation is because now you don't even need to read the question. You just read these statements.
Yes.
And then you go back to the question and say, oh, it's the except question.
Okay.
Right. So let's see. Liquid government investment pools are similar to money markets. Do you say that's true or false?
I think it's true.
That is indeed true.
Yeah, I
The
think
pool maintains a NAV of $1.
I don't think this is true.
It's the equivalent of a money market for municipalities. This is where the school, school district, the county, the fire department, the police department, they pull their money and at least get some kind of a return by investing it in money market securities,
Right.
like commercial paper, bankers' acceptances. And if the MSRB says it's a municipal security, well, then it's a municipal securities. And you said this, you said there is no prospectus for municipal securities. Well, municipal securities are exempt and they don't use prospectuses, they use official statements. And so the answer is A. Now, I think that's a really difficult question. And I think the test question would simply be to recognize that municipal securities, the local government investment pools, are a municipal securities, and municipal securities don't have to register with the under the SEC 33. It means they don't have to give people prospectuses.
Yeah.
Right. So a shelf registration.
Is good for, I think, 3 years.
Depending on what kind of firm you are, right? Depending on what kind of firm you are, depends on whether it's 3 years. If you're a WIXI, a well-known seasoned issuer of securities, you are correct. It would be 3 years for your shelf registration.
Otherwise, it's 2.
That's right. Otherwise, it's 2. So good for 3 years and requires a prospectus. And they would be 3 if it was WIXI. If it's not a WIXI, then it's 2. Right? Better to have the securities on the shelf and not need them than need them and not have them. Right? So, by the way, don't bring stuff into question. If it's that a shelf registration for a WIXI, then your D answer is correct.
Okay.
So, don't go, what if it was a WIXI? I said, well, if it was WIXI, we would told you it's a WIXI, right? So don't, sometimes you can use your own brain to kind of, I had a guy gave me an answer and it was a brilliant, coherent answer. It was wrong, but it was brilliant. I go, where is any of that in this question? And
Yeah.
boy, he just, built this whole little, I mean,
You
I was
think that it
impressed.
could trick you even more?
I was impressed that he was able to harness that much brain power to create a question that he wasn't being asked. The formula for determining a gain or loss for tax purposes is sales proceeds minus adjusted cost base. In this formula, the adjusted cost basis
Represents what is taxed as ordinary income. Represents a return of capital investment principal. Is taxed as capital gain. Represents the difference between capital investment and sale proceeds. Determine capital gain and loss for tax purposes. So sale tax. So it happened, right? So it taxed.
Sometimes I think it's better just to put the numbers of this. You had one earlier that you nailed. We had bought the stock, I think, at 72, and we sold it at 75. Our cost basis was 72. Our sales proceeds was 75.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's just put the number to it. The cost basis in our example, 72.
Mm-hmm.
So the adjusted cost basis.
It will be the tax at capital gain.
Well, no, it's not going to be taxes. It's money you already paid taxes on.
Mm-hmm.
You don't owe the money taxes on the cost base because that's money you already paid taxes on. So I don't like this question, but it's actually B.
Oh.
Right? Because that's your own money coming back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and the difference between those is going to be taxed as a capital gain. The difference between the sales proceeds and the cost basis. I don't really like the question, but I like what they're getting as is cost basis is again something you don't owe taxes on. Cost basis is simply when you turn your money into the investment. And then sales proceeds is when you turn the investment back into money.
Yeah.
John, age 45, has a traditional IRA. He also plans to contribute to a Roth. He earned $80,000 in 2024 and is not covered by an employer retirement plan. How will his eligibility for deductible contributions to traditional IRA be affected?
So he's 45, has a traditional IRA, and plan to have a Roth as well. He turned 80 and is not covered by an employer.
That's the key. That is the key.
So he's not covered. So
That's
then the traditional IRA cannot be fulfilled. So let's see.
Yeah, you're on the right track. You're pretty close to the right answer based on what you just said.
So John cannot contribute to a traditional IRA if he is also contributing to a Roth, but that's not the case. He's not employed, right? So John contribution on the
Don't have any employer pension plan, so
will not be deductible because his income exceeds. And then John can make deductible contribution to his traditional IRA because he's not covered by the employee retirement plan, regardless of the level. And John must choose between contributing to. So I think it's C.
Good job. Excellent. Excellent. I was glad you were able to squeeze the trigger because you basically had said it, kind of nothing more exasperating than getting the right answer and then, hitting the wrong button. So, a customer with no other mutual fund investment wishes to invest $47,000 in the Windmill Growth Fund. If the Class A shares are eligible for a breakpoint sales charge at 50, the action least appropriate for the agent is. They really test you heavily on what are called unethical business practices.
So they should, I mean, the advisor should disclose, right, the breaking point.
Yeah, it says a customer with no other wishes to invest 47,000, eligible for 50. The action least appropriate. You're right. So you're on the right track again.
So let's see, inform the customer that she can reduce the sale by investing. So that's
That's
true.
most appropriate.
Okay, so
That's the right thing to do, right? And they're asking what's the least appropriate.
at the least appropriate. Okay, so inform the customer, place the order as instructed. So C.
There you go.
Mhm.
Yeah, by the way, that would be a breakpoint sale, right? You're maximizing your commission by avoiding that breakpoint.
Yeah.
An investor has purchased a senior unsecured debt security that trades on the exchange. Ooh, there's a lot of words there that are a hint. Issued by a financial institution, another hint. It is backed only by the institution's good faith and credit, another hint. The security tracks the performance of a particular market index, but doesn't represent ownership in a pool of securities the way shares an exchange traded fund does or a mutual fund does. The security pays no interest and has a stated maturity date is known as.
Oh, he did. I lost the track on this, the whole
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, it's got a long story. Very testable, though. What it's testing you on is being able to contrast the answer to this question with the other things, an ETF, a mutual fund.
So, a call option or put option contract. So pays no interest and stated maturity date is known as. I'm thinking is the note, but I'm
Right
not.
on. Good job. Very testable.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah,
to,
that's right.
helping my banking.
Yeah, ETN, right on. Very testable. Which of the following is an example of a defined contribution plan
Is an example.
where you, the employee, are assuming the investment risk and your employer says they will contribute a certain amount to it?
I think it's the 401k plan.
Right on. That's exactly what it is, right? How an account is registered determines
Ownership and control of the investments in the account, ownership of the account only, the sole individual allowed to access the account, the control of investments in the account only. How an account is registered determine.
so whether it's joint tenants with rights of survivorship or tenants in common or transfer on death or uniform transfer to minors act or.
I mean, I'm thinking is the ownership and the control, right?
You're correct. You're absolutely correct. That's exactly right. What they like to ask is what happens to the decedent share. You know, I was thinking I was thinking about doing a video like on dead people because there's so many dead people on these tests, right? Somebody dies, and it was the guy who was telling me. I said, I can't think of a title for it, and he subscribes to ChatGPT. He goes, well, let's ask ChatGPT, and I go, okay. And this was kind of cool. It came back as titles for this lecture. The afterlife of money. I thought, ooh, that's pretty good. You know, another suggestion was ghost accounts. I thought, oh, okay.
Good job, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Don't use it to study, though. I can't tell you how many people, well, watch my video and they'll call me, ChatGPT says you're wrong. I said, now you realize that ChatGPT has just been scrubbing the internet.
Yes.
So it's got hallucinations. And if more people think T+2 than T+1, that's what it's going to tell you, you know.
Fulfill that.
Yeah. How is the retirement benefit calculated in a typical defined benefit plan? So you have one of those traditional plans.
So retirement benefit calculated in a typical. So this is 401k, right? Typical.
No. Defined benefit. A 401k is a defined contribution plan.
Oh, I don't know this. Determined by employee. So he always read retirement benefit calculated in a defined benefit plan.
So how do we decide what you're going to get when you retire from, I have a guy named Al, he retired from Chrysler. And so he's getting a pension check. And how did Chrysler determine what his pension check is?
I'm thinking like the more you contribute, right, in it.
Yeah. It's based on the formula. It's based on how long he worked at Chrysler and how much money he made, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way I think of it is a percentage of his base pay, whatever that was, right?
But you see, like I would have been tricked between this. I think I would have answered wrong, thinking about the fixed based on total contribution made
No,
that.
no, remember, there's no fixed base because the employer would
Mhm.
have to, the employee isn't making any contributions in the defined benefit plan,
Right.
right? There's not many of these around anymore, but I'm living off grid, and I think it's kind of fun because I'm in this now. I think I'm going to my 6 month off here, and you can't live off grid without your UPS driver.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was teasing my UPS guy. I said, those FedEx guys, you can tell they're not Teamsters. They're not union guys. So the Teamster guys are union guys, right? They have a pension plan and they get a percentage of that, whatever the case may be. And, you know,
Yeah.
all the following are lagging indicators except. So lagging indicators are caboose, tells us where we've been in the business cycle.
Yeah.
Leading indicators tell us where we're going. Coincident indicators tell us where we're at. So this says except. So one of these is not a lagging indicator.
I'm thinking, is that a commercial loan?
Commercial loans
It's
would be a lagging indicator because outstanding people may default. I wouldn't worry about this at all on your test. What I would worry about is knowing that the stock market, stock prices are a leading economic indicator because the stock market is all about earnings, our future expectations of earnings, right? The other one I would be aware of is an inverted yield curve. An inverted yield curve is when short rates on short-term bonds are higher than rates on long-term bonds. And that's a negative leading economic indicator. Personal income in this one is coincident. I wouldn't go overboard on this, but I would have some economic questions that they're going to ask you. I would definitely know that calendar quarters of declining GDP best describes a recession. I would definitely know that fiscal policy is controlled by Congress and the president.
Yep.
Fiscal policy is government spending and taxation. I would know that monetary policy is controlled by the Fed.
Money.
And that's right. That's the money supply. And I would know that the Fed is trying to do two things: price stability, that's their dual mission mandate, and full employment. And then I have a general understanding of tools of the Fed. Open market committee buys and sells government securities. And what does that have? What effect does that have on the money supply? So there is a handful of economic questions on the SIE.
Your whole hour of
Yeah,
Monica was really, really helpful.
yeah. I have a economics lecture on it, and I have it also.
Yeah. When if you work in the bank, it was very,
Yeah,
because it's different, you had like a full hour.
yeah. Okay, now here they're being a jerk because they're using Moody's. I think of Moody people are up and down. So I think of Moody's when I see big letters and small letters, I know it's Moody's. Now, usually on the test, they're going to use Standard and Poor's, which is really simple because it's below triple B. Triple B
Exactly.
is investment grade and double B would not. But now they're being a kind of a jerk and they're asking us the same question as it relates to Moody's.
So it will be BAA, so the A.
Right on. So, and remember, there's two risks when you buy bonds. The two risks when you buy bonds are credit risk based on the credit rating and interest rate risk based on, interest rates go up and your bond goes down. Right. So boom. You said BAA?
Yeah.
What type of trust is more commonly established during the grantor's lifetime? So you're creating this while you're still walking around on planet Earth.
The living trust.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Which of the following is true about non-registered personnel of FINRA member firms? So people who are chicken to go get an SIE and a 7 and a 66, or people who are chicken to get an SIE 663. I'm joking. That's There are
Can
some people that don't want to, you know,
yeah, so they
you know,
do anything with
yeah,
any.
that's okay. That's okay too. But if that's the case, then you know what follows from that.
Okay, so employees of broker have an unlimited scope of activities as long as they are under the direct supervision. Have an unlimited scope as long as they are under the direct supervision. So which of the following is true regarding non-registered personnel? Non-registered employees or brokers have a limited scope of activities. I think this will be the
That's
more.
right on. They don't make public contact regarding securities, right?
Yeah.
Solely clerical nature, right on. Which of the following is true about purchasing mutual funds and dividend eligibility?
Shares must be purchased 1 day before the record. An investor must wait for the record day to be eligible. So it will be T+1, right?
Well, not an open end because remember it's in the primary market. So in an open-end mutual fund, purchasing mutual fund shares, the record date is the X day is the day after the record.
So purchasing mutual, so which one is true about purchasing mutual fund? And
So you get the dividend. They're asking when can you get the dividend? So that's what they mean by dividend eligibility. So they're asking about the day before the X, because that's the last date you can buy a security and qualify for they be eligible for the dividend.
correct. So before an investor, so the X day must pass. That's not true. An investor can buy and still be eligible for the dividend on the same day. A share must be purchased 1 day before the record date. I think it's C.
It's actually B.
It's B.
Only because it's an open-end mutual fund, right? If it was a regular stock, shares must be purchased 1 day before the record. That would be correct because the X and the record are the same day. So if this was a stock trading in the secondary market or a closed-end fund, your answer C would be correct. Because it's not trading in the secondary market, and that means the record date's the day after, the X date is the day after the record, it's B. So you can buy it on the record date, goes X tomorrow, you're on the list, you get the dividend. I think it's a really crazy way to ask you about an X date, but you are more, I like your answer even better because more often than not on the test, you're going to need to know the X date is the same as the record, and therefore you have to buy it the last date you can buy it would be the day before the record. So I'm just saying that your C answer is more often right than in this case, the B answer, because they get kind of convoluting it a bit by making it an open-end fund. A representative allowed to engage with prospective customers. Are registered reps allowed to engage with prospective customers using social media?
Yes, with the approval of email, I think.
No, but we have to have in our written supervisory procedures, our policies and procedures on social media. And then you have to read our WSPs, written supervisory procedures, and sign acknowledging them and you understood them.
Okay.
Right, about whether you're going to be able to do Facebook or LinkedIn or, you know, Reddit, whatever the case may be. So the answer is D. And those WSPs would also have anti-money laundering procedures in there. So every new hire is going to have to read the WSPs. If you work at a major firm, oh my God, probably that thick, you know, maybe it's on a screen instead, but then you sign acknowledging you read it and you understood it. So I find you on Facebook and I say, what are you doing on Facebook? Oh, I didn't know I'm not allowed on Facebook. I go, well, here's your signature. saying you read our policies and procedures on social media and, you violate them. Some firms are pretty loosey-goosey on social media. Other firms are pretty tight,
Yeah.
You quote ABC stock to a customer. 7 bid, 1,000 shares, 700 offered, 67.10. So I hate the phraseology here. In the business and on the test, it would be 67, 67.10, 10 by 7. So 67, 67.10, 10 by 7. That's the size of my quote. The minimum size I can quote as a market maker is 100 shares. Here I'm quoting that I'm willing to do 1,000 at my bid, 700 at my offer. If I fail to honor that, very testable, that's a prohibited practice and is known as backing away. All right, which of the following is true?
So you quote stock is to a customer 67 bid for 1,000 share, 700 offered at 67.10. Which of the following is true? The quote inside spread is 0.10. 67 is the ask price. $67.10 is currently the highest price any buyer is willing to pay. 67 is currently the lowest price any seller is willing to accept. So 67 is the highest price. So bid and offered. Is the same meaning in this?
Bid and offer is the same thing. So 700 offer, that would be the asking price.
Okay.
Right. So C says 67.10 is the highest price any buyer is willing to pay. No, we don't know that. I mean, how do we know that? This isn't a question about the inside market. 67 is currently the lowest price. Now, that's kind of asked backwards because the inside quote is the highest bid and the lowest ask.
Yeah.
So C and D are out. 67 is the ask price. That's not true.
So the quote inside spread.
Yeah, the difference between the bid and the ask, right? All the following are callable except, may be callable except.
Common stock.
Yeah, a call is about fixed income investment vehicles. So even though preferred stock is a equity investment, it is still, like a bond, a fixed income investment vehicle. And the issuer would like to be able to replace high cost preferred stock with lower cost preferred stock. A client spouse owns shares in the Capco fund as tenants in common. He has a 60% ownership and she has the balance. If the client dies, what happens again? I told you this is very testable. What happens to dead people?
Yeah, lots of dead people.
Yeah, I mean, all these tests, right? That, they have questions where grandma dies and, granddaughter gets the stock, and you get like killing people on these tests. I'm joking, but
Okay, so tenants in common. So he has 60% ownership interest in the account and the spouse has the balance. Does it matter the ownership? I mean, it's tenants in common anyway. Do they put
very testable. Tenants in common, the decedent share goes to their estate or beneficiary. So here, who died? So the client dies. What happens to the shares they got? So a client and his spouse own shares in the Capco fund. He has 60 and the spouse has the balance. If the client, so the client is the not the spouse. So that's the 60%. So what happens to the 60%?
So I'm thinking it's going to
That's right. It's going to be tied up, right? She's not going to be able to do it, right? So 40% goes to the spouse and the other goes to a estate or beneficiary. Now, by the way, the test will be a lot clearer on that language than this particular question, right? Transfer on death avoids probate. joint tenants with rights or survivorship, the surviving party gets the entire account. That's a very testable. A new client of the member firm has just opened a margin account. After account approval, the client's initial trade is to buy 100 shares at 25. But this is very much a test question. With Reg T at 50%, the order to be in compliance with all regulations, the client needs to deposit. Stupid, but testable.
So it's a new client.
That's right. And he's buying $2,500 worth of stock. If this was not a new customer, the answer would be B.
Mm-hmm.
But because he's a new customer, the answer is?
I think it will be A. It's two.
Right? Yeah, right. Remember, between $2,000 and $4,000, he has to come up with $2,000.
Yeah.
Stupid, but testable. Now, if he bought less than that, then he would just pay in full.
Yeah.
So if he bought 100 shares at 18, I call that question stupid, but testable. I can't imagine any draw in which you don't get asked that question. They just love that question on the exam. Now, remember, that's not Reg T. That is the SRO that comes up with that. Which of the following securities is exempt from 33? Very testable.
The municipal note.
Yeah, the municipal notes, municipal securities are exempt from 33, right? They don't have prospectuses. They don't make registration statements. What municipalities use, whether it's a TAN, tax anticipation note, or a BAN, a bond anticipation note, or a tax and revenue anticipation notes, these municipal notes are issued by municipalities to even out their cash flow. They're anticipating some taxes, but they'd like the money now. So they go to a money market fund manager, say, how about I give you a TAN, a tax anticipation note? It's kind of like the muni equivalent of borrowing against receivables. But whether it's a GO bond, a revenue bond, a 529, an LGIP, whatever, if it's a municipal security, is it exempt from 33? Boom. Local government investment pool may be managed to maintain a stable net asset value. This will do what for the pool? Well, what's the purpose in a money market fund or an LGIP of fixing the NAV at $1?
Reduce the volatility.
Yeah, that's right. It's always $1. Right. So you got two choices now that say reduce volatility. You got A choice and you got C choice.
I think reduce the volatility and liquidity.
Yeah, that's but yeah, you got liquidity. The whole point of a money market fund is to have liquidity. So you can write a check against this pool and we'll clear it. We'll sell off securities, whatever we have to do. When choosing to issue additional bonds to the general public in order to raise more capital, a corporate issuer is engaging in
initial public offering.
Well, it's not an IPO because it says additional bonds.
Oh, so choosing to additional bonds.
Yeah, if it said when choosing to issue bonds for the first time, then it would be an IPO, but it's not. It's a follow-on offering. We're coming back to get some more money.
Secondary.
I don't like the language, but secondary means the previous owner is receiving the money and the previous owner is not receiving them. And so this is a follow-on, but it's still primary, meaning the issuer is going to receive the proceeds. Right? Primary means the issuer is going to receive the proceeds. Secondary means the previous owner has received the proceeds. And so here, the reason we know it's primary says raise more capital. So you're not buying anything in the secondary, right? Now, by the way, a public offering could be secondary. For example, the Pritzker family sold their interest in the Hyatt hotel chain by doing an IPO. I wasn't a big fan of that because none of that money went to the Hyatt hotel chain. All the money raised was cashing out the existing owners. That is a secondary offer where we're telling you this money is not going to the issuer.
Yeah.
The first step in the process of adding options trading to a customer account, very testable.
So the first day of so trading, they need to sign the option agreement, but let's see what other options.
Yeah, but it says the first step. You don't sign the agreement, right? I mean, how could you do that? Because you got to read, you got work to do first.
Based on reasonable grounds, the customer can understand and afford the risk of the recommendation. This is a good one.
Yeah, that's very good.
The customer needs and understand the option risk disclosure you provided. The customer account is approved for options. I think B will be the first.
Right on, right on. It is indeed B. This is very testable. The sequence of opening this account, a good memory aid device for this is Dado 15.
I screenshot your video with exactly this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dado 15. What happened to my D? Oh, there it is. So I say here is the OCC disclosure document. Characteristics and risks of options. This is all the bad things that can happen to you. You can't possibly read this while I wait. So I give you the disclosure of it. I go back to my registered option principle, very tested. He says, did you give her the disclosure document? I better say yes. He says, okay, I'm approving the account. I say, hey, good news. I got you approved. We can do our first trade. That's the T. I need back from you within 15 days of account approval the option agreement that you read and understood that booklet. That sequence is very, very testable. If the 15th day comes and goes and you haven't got back to me that option agreement, I'm only going to allow you to do closing transactions. I'll let you get rid of the stuff you've got. I'm not going to let you do anything new until you get the booklet, the option agreement back to us. So very, very testable, that sequence. FINRA is the primary regulator in the United States for
broker dealers
right on.
and the bankers.
No, banks don't answer to FINRA. Banks after the FDIC, the Comptroller Currency, and the Federal Reserve Board.
So the broker dealer, and then I mean the SEC is in the same.
No, the SEC is not FINRA. That's a government agency. Broker dealers and people who work at broker dealers, which are known as registered reps, associated persons. It's 1 and 2. Now remember, what kind of organization is FINRA? Very testable. What kind of organization is FINRA? It is test question a SRO, a self-regulatory organization, right? A self-regulatory organization, right? Banks don't supervise themselves. Banks are supervised by the Federal Reserve Board, Comptroller Currency, FDIC, and the SEC. I joke, the SEC is God, right? So, they outrank FINRA. Jim's Tech Fund has a public offering price of $75.28. Your customer invests 40,000. How many shares will he receive?
So it has a public offering of 75.28 per share. So let me do 40,000 divided by 7.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Okay, so 40 divided by 75.28. So 531.34. Yeah. So round up 35.
Yeah, yeah. And what this is testing on is that mutual funds, you can get fractional shares.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in stocks, you don't get typically fractional shares. A married couple opens a new account with a broker-dealer as tenants in common. And explaining the details of the account to the couple, the registered rep would not indicate which of the following.
They will not indicate. Mail may be sent to either party with the permission of the other party. I think this is not true because they are joint, right? Tenant in common. So mail may be sent to either party. Oh no, this will be a true one. Certificates may be registered in the name of either party. In the event of death, the descendant interest in the account goes to the descendant estate, so tenants in common. Orders may be given by either party. So orders can be given by either party.
That's true.
Mail may be sent to either party with the
That's true. That's true.
and then certificates can be registered in the. I don't think it's true. This.
No, you'd say, no, it's not true, right?
Mhm.
Say, hey, Dean, just put me on there. You don't need to have my wife on that certificate.
Yeah.
I go, no, 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 no. In order to receive a declared dividend, a shareholder must be an owner of, as of record, at the close of business on. So when do you have to be on the shareholder list to get the dividend?
On the record day.
Yeah, that one, I just think the language makes it sound more complicated than it really is. And I think what they're hoping is that you're looking too hard and you're going, oh man, this is a question about the X date. No, the X date would be the first date on which you no longer trade with the dividend attached, right?
Mhm.
Which of the following debt securities has an interest that is subject to federal income tax, but not state income tax? I kind of like this. This is kind of a weird way to ask it, but I like it.
Securities that have federal but
Yeah,
not.
so the US Treasury is going to tax you, but your state is not going to tax you.
The strips.
Yeah, right on. The US Treasury can and does tax you.
Hmm.
States would like to, but can't.
Yeah.
Right. And that 30-year debenture would be fully taxable. Which of the following investments would not require heightened suitability requirements before recommending them to your client?
Would not required suitability.
So three of these things are, dangerous, and one of these things is pretty mellow.
So will not require. I think the mutual fund will be the.
Yeah, that's the most conservative thing, right? I mean, an ETN, debt security, oil and gas, wildcat program, a hedge fund, those are all very dangerous things requiring heightened suitability. The minimum initial requirement, buying 100 shares at 15, a new account would be stupid but testable.
The minimum initial requirement when buying, so initial, it will be 1,500.
Right on, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
For which of the following investors would Class C shares be most appropriate? So we have A shares, we have B shares, and we have C shares.
So an investor interested in high risk, high potential return, an investor who intends to redeem the shares within a short time, a relatively inexperienced investor, an investor who intends to leave the money in the fund for many years. I would say D as a dog.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's not D as in dog, it's B as in boy.
Okay, so
Because every quarter you're going to get the sales charge, or I should say the promotional expense deducted from this. And so after what, 3, 4, 5 years, you would have been better to go for an A or a B share, right? You said D.
I did, yeah.
No, D would be correct for something like the B share, the A share. Long-term time horizon, would be an A share or a B share.
Mhm.
Short-term time horizon would be the C share.
Ah.
Limited partnerships sold publicly via prospectus, we be expected to have. That's kind of a stupid question, but
I mean, a large group of investors.
yeah, it's a public program. Yes.
Yeah. And then let's see, a large. So let's see D, a large group of investors, each contributing a small sum. I
Yeah,
think,
excellent, excellent.
yeah.
That's actually it.
Mm.
I think it's kind of stupid. What you should know, yeah, I don't even think you're very likely you're not going to get any partnership questions on the test. But if you do, the
Mhm.
one you need to know is that partnerships are not liquid. You can't get in or out of a partnership. You don't have a freely transferable interest. And then maybe you get tested on tax credits for low income housing or for historic real estate. But if you tell me you missed your mark on the SIE because of partnerships, I'm going to say, I don't know, you have other problems. Drew purchased 200 shares of Sunnymead Brothers bottlers for 40. 1 year later, he sold the shares for 41. Over the year, the company paid 25% or 25 quarterly dividend was Drew's total return. I would be prepared to do total return and current yield on your exam. So the only two ways you can make money in an investment is income stream and or price appreciation. So here I made $1 in price appreciation. Over the year, they paid a 25-cent quarterly dividend, so I made $1. So I made $2. My total return was $2. Now they're asking me to express it as a percentage. So now I'm going to take the $2 and divide by 40. I think that's easier, by the way, than taking the 200 times 40, which is $8,000. I would just do it per share. And then when I'm all done, do the division, right? So what I made was $2. And what I spent to make that $2 was 40. So I simply take the 2, I divide by the 40, and that will tell me that my total return from the income and the price appreciation was 5%.
Mhm.
And I would be prepared to do a total return question on the test, right? All the phone may be purchased in the secondary market except
Common shares of an opened investor.
yeah, remember those don't trade in the secondary market.
Yeah.
That's with a prospectus, right?
Mhm.
Every transaction is primary. All the following stocks, which would be defined as a penny stock? I like this one.
So that pink stock.
Yeah, that's right. So you need 4.
And then NASDAQ listed stock trading at 4 per share. And then over the counter market stock. I think it's 1 and.
No, remember it's a
But
non-NASDAQ OTC stock. A
okay.
NASDAQ stock under 5 is not a penny stock.
Mhm.
If it's a trading on New York or NASDAQ, it's not a penny stock regardless of the price. It's a non-NASDAQ OTC stock. 2 and 4 are penny stocks,
Mhm.
right? 2 and 4 are penny stocks. And then remember, this definition is testable. And then remember the disclosure, the monthly statement, the established customer, all of that is very testable. A call option reaches its expiration date and goes unexercised. This means
So call option reaches the expiration and gets unexercised. This means the buyer gets the premium paid. A call option. So the buyer loses the premiums paid because it's a call. Call option reaches to expiration. So do I have the call or I'm buying the call?
well, it says both. It says
So
so
call
if you buy it, do you gain the premium if it expires?
if I buy
You
it,
lose the premium.
so if I buy the call and expire, I lose the.
Right on. That's exactly right. If I'm your broker and I say, hey, it expired worthless, right? So 2 is true. Okay. So if you're the writer and it expires, is that going to be good news or bad news for you?
It's the bad news because it's
Oh,
expired.
it's good news. You get to keep the money. Go neener, neener, neener.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So 2 and 3, right?
Uh,
Right. When you buy options, the worst case is you lose your money. When you sell an option, the best case is you agree to be a potential victim. Nobody victimizes you and you keep the money.
money.
2 and 3. In a defined benefit plan,
The benefit amount if is fixed.
that's correct.
Okay. And then the contribution amount is fixed as well.
No, remember the employer has to, in some years, put more money in or less money in
Mhm.
because they have a responsibility to have enough money to make good on the promises they've made to the employees. So that's called an unfunded pension liability. And at some point, they got to make it up. So the contribution, I might say as a CFO, hey, good news, we don't have to make a contribution this year.
So one
We have
and
enough money to take care of the promises we've made to our employee.
Mhm.
So it's 1 and 4. Remember, the contribution is being made by the employer.
yeah.
I told you about the guy Al who worked at Chrysler, and I was teasing Al. I said, Al, I've been reading where the CEO of Chrysler that the dealers don't like him, the Chrysler dealers, because he won't let them sell the cars for a competitive price. I was reading the shareholders don't like him. I was reading the employees and retirees who don't like him. I go, man, he can't be long for this world if none of these constituencies like him. I said, and Chrysler's having some serious problems, Stellantis. I said, are you worried about your pension plan? He said, no, Dean, my pension plan comes from the UAW. It's a multi-employer plan, and that pension is very secure. He said, but I am worried about my health insurance because Chrysler is responsible for paying that for him. I said, oh, well, there we go. Whoop, I think I forgot to hit the button. 1 and 4. Which of the following calls for the underwriters to buy securities from the issuer? Which of the following calls for the underwriter to buy securities from the issuer, acting as an agent, not a principal? Wow, that's kind of a tough.
Which of them calls for the underwriters to buy securities from the issuer acting as an agent? So firm commitment, follow on, best efforts, initial price offering. Initial public offering.
Initial public offering is a type of offering. It's called a best efforts underwriting. I tell the issuer I'm going to do my damnedest to sell their securities. The underwriters buy securities from the issuer, acting as an agent, not a principal. In a firm commitment underwriting, I say, I am so confident I can sell these securities, my syndicate will buy them. And that's called a firm commitment underwriting. And so this is a best efforts deal. And I tell the issuer that I'm going to do the best I can. There's going to be an escrow account, right? I was doing this best efforts underwriting my firm. And it was a $10 million non-deal, and we had an escrow account. And this guy, I'm not joking, I felt like his name is Gary. And he says, Dean, I think I should invest the $500,000 to make the deal effective so you can break escrow? And I said, now, Gary, before I answer that question, I need to disclose some things to you. You know, my broker dealer has been hired by the issuer to raise this money. I don't represent you. I represent the issuer as their agent. It, be unlikely that I'm not going to tell you to invest. Now, you're not buying the securities from my broker dealer. You indeed are buying the issuer. If you would like an independent person to know whether you should invest, you should contact your attorney or your accountant. Now that I've made that disclosure to you, that I'm an agent to the issuer, not your agent, hell yes, I think you ought to invest. Right? So we can break escrow, right? So that's agent. If I say we are buying the securities, for example, Elon sold $10 billion worth of bonds to buy out Twitter. And so that was a firm commitment underwriting led by Morgan Stanley. So as far as Elon is concerned, the bonds are sold. They weren't able to sell the bonds to investors. And so these banks had these billions of dollars on their balance sheet in these bonds. Here recently, they were able to finally unload the bonds. That's a firm commitment underwriting. That's where I say, I'm so confident I can sell the securities. I'm acting in my dealer principal capacity. Now, you're not going to get a lot of questions on banking capital markets, but you will get a couple. You will be a IPO could be either. The IPO could be a firm commitment or it could be a best efforts. Just depends. What class of shares have a 12B1 fund as the primary promotional expense?
Which class of shares have the 12B1 fee as the primary? I'm thinking is the class A.
Well, no, Class A has the front end load. Class A is the one that has the breakpoints and has a front end load, no more than very testable 8.5%. And the B shares have a contingent deferred sales charge. And we just said that C shares are short term because of this fee. It
So,
never goes away. It's the C share.
yeah.
Right. Which of the following reasons for separation would not require further disclosure on a U5? So U4 is hello, U5 is goodbye. A U5 disassociates you from a broker dealer, and they're asking which of these would not require an amendment to your U4.
Because it's so which of the reason for
Yeah. So what would not require further disclosure? I think it's kind of a silly question, but I
So-
shouldn't. I mean,
do I see other?
well, when you die, I mean, you're dead. So what do you care, right? So I think this is a pretty stupid question. I don't think you're going to see this question. The test question is on the test about a U4 or a U5. U4, very testable. If a no answer becomes a yes answer, we have 30 days to amend that U4, very testable. And when we file a U5 on you, we have to give you a copy of that U5 so that we're on the same page about the circumstances of your disassociation. Right, so that would be testable. And then, we do a final check, and maybe as part of the U5, we're going to have to amend it. What is one of the main employer obligations in a defined benefit plan?
Main employer obligation.
That's the big difference, right? B would be defined contribution, not defined benefit. C would be defined contribution, 401k like, and we don't have to provide quarterly updates.
But why is not the why, for example, is not the matching employee contribution?
Well, because employees on the defined benefit, you don't have to match anything.
Oh, okay.
Right? I say, hey, you don't have to need to do anything for your retirement. We're going to take care of it for you. Not many employers do that anymore. Right? I'm more like your granddad or grandma's pension plan. Almost all employers today offer a form of defined contribution plan, so they don't have to worry about unfunded pension liabilities. I say, listen, I'm only promising you what I'm going to contribute for your retirement. You invest it, whatever it grows to or falls to, that's what you get. Capital markets can be characterized by all the following except.
So they would include stocks and bond market. Securities traded in term can be bought and sold by both individuals and institutions. They are utilized by the public sector only, and entities can utilize them to finance both long and short-term capital. So capital markets, are they only public sector?
No, they're both public and private, right? Municipalities sell municipal bonds and corporations sell bonds. So public sector only, what that means is, municipal issuers. Right? An investor has opened an individual brokerage account for use in his small business and has given a business partner a power of attorney over the account. Which of the following persons may have access to the account for trading purposes?
So the person with the power of attorney, obviously.
Right on. That's absolutely correct.
And then the investor who opened the account.
Right on. 2 and 3, right? He still has control of his own account. Customer sees interest from a treasury note. They will likely owe income taxes on this income at what levels? So this is the second time you've had this kind of a question.
So customer receives from a T-note, they will likely owe income taxes. This income at what level? So it's federal, right?
That's right. Remember, the U.S. Treasury can and will tax you. States would like to, but can't.
Mhm.
An investor opens an account in B and Z government securities, a broker-dealer, limiting its transactions exclusively to securities issued by the U.S. government. The account holds 250,000 of Treasury bonds and 250,000 of Treasury notes and 50,000 in cash. If the broker-dealer's business should fall, the investor would receive from SIPC a protection in the amount. SIPC is very testable.
So they have 250 in cash, right? So
Where does it say cash? I don't see 250,000 in cash.
that's the maximum, right?
Well, yeah, that's exactly right.
So he will receive the 50 in cash.
Well, remember, we go securities first.
Okay, so
We go securities first. So if BNZ's broker-dealer should fail, the investor would receive from SIPC in the amount. This is kind of stupid, by the way, because BNZ, if all you do is business exclusively in government securities, you are not required to participate in SIPC.
Oh.
Stupid. I wouldn't worry about that at all in the test. This is what I call a gotcha question, but it would be B or A. I'm going to cover you for all of the securities, and that's that. So you're going to be a general creditor for the 50,000 in cash. We go securities first. Because they only do business with government securities, the answer is
Okay, that's a tricky one, but the good
yeah,
one.
I'm with you. That's I think a stupid question. Narcissist, a social media company, has shares selling at 50. Your customer is bearish. You'd like to sell the stock short, but not until it retreats at least 10% from its current market price. In order to catch the drop, he could
So he's selling and is bearish. He would like to sell the stock short, but not until it receives at least 10%. So if it's bearish, he needs to get the opposite, the same of the market, right? Bearish.
So one of the use of stop orders is to establish a stock position, right? And so if you're going to establish a short position, that means you're going to use a sell stop.
At 45.
There you go, right? All the following would be considered as part of the general standards for all communications with the public, except
The future results is not.
yeah, we say my crystal ball is broke.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the future. Past performance
Yeah.
is not indicative of future results. Can a sole proprietor business account have margin trading?
I'm thinking it's with the approval.
Yeah, yeah. I call this reduction of the ridiculous. What's it look like if you tell a sole proprietor you can't have a margin account? I'm gonna say, what? What are you talking about? Now, by the way, all the required forms, very testable, are the credit agreement, where you say you understand you're borrowing money, you're paying interest, mandatory. A hypothecation agreement, where you say you understand you're pledging your securities as collateral for the loan, mandatory. Loan consent form, optional. I say this is where we'd like to lend your securities to other customers. That is not mandatory. Your customer purchases 5. Jim calls it 3. Funds must be deposited in the account to pay for the trade no later than
the next business day.
Yeah, remember all securities trade settle T+1. Now remember, house requirements can be more stringent. I mean, there's some firms that might want you to fund it before you do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
A stockholder submits a proxy for the annual meeting, but chooses to attend the meeting to vote. What becomes of the proxy? So proxy is how you vote without attending the meeting, but now you've decided that you are going to attend the meeting.
So he can just go and vote, right?
Yeah,
We'll-
right on. Yeah, right. He's just voting proxy. The proxy will be revoked, and he just votes like you would have, right? We don't need the proxy because you're here physically, right, to vote.
Yeah.
The personal data assistant maker hands-on spent considerable resources developing a new product that used a unique user interface. Unfortunately, the interface proved a failure and was quickly surpassed by a competitor system. As a result, the stock fell. This is an example of very testable.
Sale risk,
Excuse me?
sales risk.
No. There's no such thing as sales risk. Non-systematic risk, known as selection risk. You picked the wrong stock,
Yeah.
right? So whenever you have something unique to the stock, it's non-systematic or selection risk. Systematic risk would be the market, risks in the market. How does a living trust differ from a decedent trust in terms of flexibility?
Living trust a living trust can be modified.
Yeah, I mean, you're still here, right?
Yeah.
If you pass on, it's too late for you to change.
Yeah.
I feel really bad when I read some of these trusts where, they after the guy's dead, they do something they're not supposed to. Like I was reading where this museum sold off the art that the guy donated after he was dead, and he specifically said no. And they sold it because it was worth a lot of money, and they got some cash, and they said they were going to do great things with it. A customer wants to save money for his grandson's college education in an IRA account. Which of the following regarding a Coverdale savings accounts is true?
The customer may take deduction for the amount contributed. The customer may make annual contributions, cannot may made until the grandson graduates from college. The fund must be distributed by the time the grandchild attains age 30, unless they are rolled over. The maximum contribution permitted is 3,000. I think it's C as a cat.
You are correct. Emily, age 63, withdrew 20 grand from her additional IRA in 2024. She did not meet any of the exceptions for penalty-free withdrawals before age 59 and a half. What are the tax implications? I mean, who cares? Because she's 63 is how I would read this.
Yeah, so there will not be a withdrawal since early is 59 and a half. So I think it will be taxed as ordinary income, right?
Right on. There's no way to get a capital gain from any retirement plan. You should have been immediately able to get rid of C. Right. So that's out, right? Everything coming out of a distribution from a pension plan is never going to be capital gains, always ordinary income at tax rate. Seacoast Securities, a member firm, filled a customer sell order for big tech common stock and did not charge a commission. The firm most likely acted in what capacity?
As a dealer.
Oh, good. You're pretty good at that stuff. You've been very consistently good at that, those kind of questions. XYZ Technology currently trades at 60, pays a 30-cent dividend. I would be prepared to do current yield. I have a memory aid device for you. AMP.
What it costs?
Annual interest or dividend, in this case, annual dividend, divided by the market price. What the investment pays you, annual dividend, divided by what it costs you, market price. So it's 30-cent dividend times 4, right? It pays 30 cents. So that's times 4. That's $1.20. So then we take our calculator. What it pays us is $1.20. What it costs us is 60. I get 2%. So we had two math questions I think you're going to see on your exam. We had total return and current yield. You should be prepared to do both of those on your exam. I wish there were more math questions, to be honest with you, because the neat thing about a math question is there's no interpretation of the right answer. You simply get it right or you get it wrong. Which of the following is a characteristic of market manipulation that is not found in legitimate trading?
So use of artificial.
Yeah, that's called manipulation. Absolutely. T-bills are the U.S. government's
Short-term year.
Boom. Oh my God, on
My
Bo.
gosh, ready to test tomorrow.
Yeah. Now remember, you did something a little different, so let's just talk about that. A lot of people are taking the practice test as a intellectual inventory 2, 3, 4 days before they test. I had somebody like you, a Series 24, and he booked the shared screen and he said, Dean, I don't want to do it as a kind of an intellectual inventory. I want to use it just to kind of talk about questions like we did today, kind of riff on it. And that's how we did this. Now, you did a tutoring session yesterday, and I told you that if you were kind enough to share on the channel, that I would give you a deal. And here's the deal: the best deal you could ever get. This 2 hours is on me because you were so kind. And we're gonna now, if you want to do what usually is doing, we can do it again. Right. And remember, you are a paid student, so you all have access to free office hours. Those are free. They're on the class tab. That's available. We have a Q&A jam session coming up. That's free. So besides the paid tutoring from yesterday, we have other free stuff. All right. Let me kill our recording.
Oh my gosh.
Let's talk about